Welcome back to ShePropTalk. I am Beverly from Down in Creative Studios, and today I am so excited. I'm talking to Amanda. You also know her as JediManda. Oh my gosh, I am just beside myself. I get to talk to you today. Thank you so much for being here. Welcome.
Well, thank you. And you're too sweet. Seriously, I'm a listener of the podcast, and I was really excited to get that text from you. And I was like, yes, of course I'll talk to you. Let's chat.
Oh my gosh. Well, I've been kind of stalking you online for some time now because your stuff is just out of this world. I mean, it's just fantastic.
Likewise. Hello.
Oh, geez. Well, thank you. Well,
yeah.
I can't wait to pick your brain about a certain project that you are working on. But before we start talking about that, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? Like how did you start? Where are you from? All that stuff. Let us know.
Yeah. I love telling my how did I get into cosplay story because it's usually way different from most people. Well, first off, I'm from Kentucky, Louisville to be exactly, Midwest girl, born and raised. And I got into cosplay a little bit different because I actually didn't start cosplaying until about 2012. But I've been a professional seamstress and costume designer since 2008. And I actually went to school for fine arts, and I have a degree in fine art painting.
Really?
But when I went, I do. I would spin the computer around. You could see my gallery walls. You can't see them. Just stare at Captain Marvel. It's fine. It's better than those old paintings anyway.
I'm good with that.
Okay, cool. But when I was in college, my thesis, my subject matter were women and clothing, and I painted a lot of models and random clothing they would wear or something I'd pick up from Goodwill or, yada, yada. But my mentor was like, have you ever thought about making your own clothes for your models to wear? And I was like, I've thought about it, but I never really, whatever. I'm a painter. She was like, well, there's some costume design classes on campus. Why don't you take some sewing classes? And I was like, I've always wanted to, but I've just never had the time because painting requires a lot of time.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, sure. So the next semester, like my sophomore year or something, I signed up for costume design and sewing techniques 101. And I was just like, where has this been in my life? I fell in love with it. And I've always been a fan of costumes, but I never thought about it because I'm like, it's Halloween. I like conventions, but I go just to like see the stuff. I don't really go to like dress up. Mm-hmm. And so I started working in costume design, and I started working in our theater, and I started designing shows, and I was like, I really freaking dig this as I'm still working as a painter. Enough food on my palate. I mean, it's crazy.
So
but
you
as
were
I
like
started
never sleeping,
shows,
like sleep was like out the window.
I don't even remember college. It was a 4.5 year blur. It was seriously, I was making so much work. I have a lot to show from it. Memories, I don't even know what happened. What was I going to say? Oh yeah. So my thesis ended up being costumes that I created from scratch and ended up painting them in my portraits. And then that was like my senior show. And then when I got out of school, I was so burnt out on painting because that's all I did. And I was just like, I don't even want to pick up the paintbrush. And I haven't in a while, which stinks, but there's reasons I haven't. So I got a job as a tailor and worked in alterations and wedding dresses. This is all before I started making stuff for myself. I'm making things for other people, and I'm doing small-time work for our local theater. And I got a job working as a costume seamstress for our local ballet at the Louisville Ballet. And I'm just like, you know what? I'm so tired of making costumes for other people. I'm like, I want to wear these damn things. And so I just was escalating my Halloween costumes just better and better every year. And like slowly
the gateway drug.
Yes, slowly winning like bar costume contests and like Halloween. And I'm like, it's mine. I'll take that $100 check for whatever. But like, as snooty as that sounds, it's exactly what got me into doing this thing. And then I didn't go to my first con till like 2011. And I just went not dressed up. And that was kind of in the middle of all of that finding myself bit. And I was like, what are these people doing? It's the middle of June and I am not in an outfit. And so the next convention I went to, which was the same con the year after, I dressed up as Katana from Mortal Kombat 3. And I made the outfit, and I made all of my friends' outfits that were in my group. And we just you just slayed so hardcore. And I was like, well, I know what I'm going to be doing for a
Yeah,
while. And
I
then
guess this is my life now.
it really is. It came into that. And I got a job as a costumer. And I went back to school to get a job as, to get my graphic design degree. And I was like, I just really feel like this is my calling. And I hated theater in high school.
Oh, wow.
Like I
Wow.
hated musicals, I hated plays, but I loved working the stage, working backstage, getting people in and out of costumes, doing last minute fixings. I just loved that feeling. And I was like, I really care a lot about costumes. And I just kind of pushed that into working and building my own little brand. And here we are.
Jeez.
Cosplay.
Okay,
Yeah,
I love that story. I wish that was my story. That's so great.
yeah, it's so weird
Wow.
because but the thing is like I came into cosplay already as a professional seamstress, and like people are like, well, how did you start it? Did you start making like t-shirt dresses and stuff? And I was like, no, I started making Amidala gowns. Like, it's
Like
oh,
I was on the high dive and I started up there.
as weird as
But
that sounds, like exactly how it was.
yeah, but that's great though. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I think that the cosplay community is full of people who have done other things that either align or like completely don't align at all with cosplay.
Yeah.
But what an amazing way. I feel like you've as soon as you stepped into that convention, it was like in a giant door opening for you, like with angels like singing, like this is
really was.
the rest of your life, like right in here. That's awesome.
Yeah, and I remember. Do you remember the channel G4? Like
Kind
from back in the day, they would do like exposés on San Diego Comic-Con. And I remember watching them and being like, why are these people in costumes? Like, I don't get it. And then people would say what cosplay is. And I thought that was just something in Japan that had to do with like anime and manga. I didn't really think it was like a worldwide thing until I was like, no, girl, it's something you can do. And I was like, yes, I'll do it.
That is so great. So is that something that you do full time now? Do you?
No, actually. That'd be cool. But I work for a wig company here in Louisville, Kentucky. I work for a custom wig company, and like our title says, we make custom wigs. And as close as that is to cosplay, it's still not. This is not my full-time job.
Yeah.
I don't go to a lot of conventions as a guest. I don't do the Patreon thing. Like, this is literally my side hustle hobby.
Yeah.
And I have a full 9-to-5 job, but that still is correlating with cosplay because I wear our wigs to conventions. It gets our name out there. So it all just kind of meshes together in this weird theater costuming world that I have that is my career.
Gosh, that is so cool. It's almost like a Doctor Strange kind of a relationship. So many facets of your life. Yes. So yeah, let's talk about that costume. You you recently the Cosplay Culture Magazine just came out, and bam, there you are on the cover with that amazing, incredible picture. So I have been familiar with your cosplay for a while because your pictures like go viral. Pretty much every single costume that you make is like all over the place because it's just outstanding. But that picture of Doctor Strange with all of the hands, I think I ran across that picture probably 25 times in like 2 days, and I could not get enough of it. It's just, I kept going back to it and like, oh my God, like that costume is amazing. That concept is amazing. This photography is amazing. This composite is amazing. Like, this is, who is this person? And then I saw your Queen Amidala. And then, I mean, it's just, what kind of character is like, what are you drawn to? I mean, obviously, like, I'm getting chills just talking about it. It's just over the top, like beautiful, like textures or.
I'm drawn to, that beautiful, textured, heavy. I call my cosplays hot and heavy. Not the fact that I'm like naked. It's the fact that I'm wearing things that are hot and that are heavy. And I've never been able to be like, I'm comfortable in my outfits. If I say I'm comfortable, that means I'm not successful.
Yeah, I need to add more to this costume.
Add more. But I'm really drawn to, and I think that this kind of correlates back to my degree as a costume designer. Like how I would design outfits were detailed. They were things that I in my sketches and my art that I would paint texture, and that's what I'm drawn to. I want to go up and like touch it, and be like, ooh, this feels good. And like,
Yeah.
I like being able to manipulate fabric to get something completely different than just looking at it. And the Doctor Strange cosplay, when I saw the movie, and I've always been a fan of Doctor Strange, but like, you gotta understand, like his old outfits from the 70s is kind of hokey. Like the collar's like here, and it just looks ridiculous. And so I was like,
It's
oh, whatever.
somebody's favorite costume.
It's someone's favorite, but not mine. And I love
Someone
a
out
weird
there.
psychedelic cringy thing, but I was like, ugh. But when Marvel started making the MCU movies and they're bringing aspects of the costume from the comic book into reality, but making it make sense, is why I'm just like, yes. And I loved Benedict Cumberbatch as Doctor Strange, and the outfit he was wearing was so cool. It was textured. It was designed well. It had some regional aspects of like where he trained in like a Tibet, or wait, hold on. Kathmandu, that's it, Kathmandu. And so I loved all those like fold lines and details, and I was like, ugh, I gotta make it. Ugh, I have to make it. I get these urges. It just like, it's like, I don't know, costume vomit. I'm like, oh, I gotta make it.
You're compelled. You're compelled to get all that texture. So yeah, let's talk about that cloak, because those details are insane. How do you approach a project like that has so many different textures and so many different? I mean, that cloak is not only insanely textured, it's also asymmetrical in a big way. So how do you start something like that?
That was really fun, draping that mother. Woof. I break it down into parts. Anytime I do something that is crazy, detailed, textured, heavy, whatever, I break it down into sections, because that's the only way my brain can understand it. And so I was like, okay, the first thing I need to do is get the shape. And I drape a lot of my costumes on the mannequin. And so I was able to buy this fabric that's already heavy. I knew it was going to have to be like an upholstery fabric, and it is. Good old upholstery fabric from Joann's. And I knew I was going to have to get this right shape. And so once I draped it on the mannequin, I pinned it to hell and then stitched in spots, tried it on. I was like, okay, I got the look. And then I just started trimming in areas that I was like, this hangs where it needs to be, you know. Once I had the shape of the cloak, and then I was like, it's detail time. Then came the collar. Then came that couching embroidery on the back of the collar. And after that, I moved to the the panels on the sides. And then I moved to the lining. And then I moved to the embroidery. It's all about breaking it down into sections to get your brain to wrap around it. Because then once you're done, you're like, holy cow, I made that. Because if you look at it, it's overwhelming. It is. Yeah. But it's just like
crazy.
Chop it up. It's doable. Anything.
So if you start smaller and then kind of accumulate from there, something as daunting as that cloak could be a little less intimidating. Yeah, I've definitely experienced that with some bigger builds, like when my wasp costume was totally overwhelming. But yeah, just focusing on one thing at a time really helped me out.
And that can go from design to the cutting or the patterning to the cutting to the assembly, then the details. I think people, especially with sewing projects, and especially stuff that's coming out of the MCU, coming out of Star Wars, stuff is so textured, people get so overwhelmed, and they're like, I just can't do it. They give up. And I'm like, no, break it down, like write it out. I have journals, like stacks of journals of me just writing out, like even menial things, like tack this button. Like if I write it down, I'm able to check that off. Like you'd be amazed what you can make if you just give yourself a guideline.
Oh, that's a really good tip. I make lists all the time at work when I'm like, I really just want to be making my stuff right now and I don't want to be at work. So I'll make a list just to get my mind like mentally in that space, because it's a fun space to be in. But yeah, to make something a little bit more permanent, to go back to that. That's a wonderful idea. I'm going to start doing that.
Do it. Seriously. And you'll be amazed how many sketchbooks you will fill so fast.
Awesome.
It's cool.
Well, you are recently, you have been working on the most amazing costume of the most amazing superhero that oh my gosh, the trailer just dropped and I think I've watched it like 25 times already, and I'm going to go watch it another 25 times. I'm so excited. You are making Captain Marvel.
I am. I'm making Captain Marvel. I'm making good old Carol herself.
Are you finished with it?
No.
Okay.
Actually, I am, I think, honestly, 75% done. Like the top and the pants are kind of done. But like I'm working on like the gloves right now and the gauntlets and then the boots. And then once that's done, then I'm going to tackle the helmet somehow. I have an idea.
Make that helmet.
I've got to make that helmet. And I'm so mad because like, I'm not mad. I love Captain Marvel and I know she has a mohawk. I've read the comic books. I'm a fan. And I was just like, cause at work we made the wig for my Carol. And I'm like, I can't wait to wear this and promote the company and then also promote Carol. And then she's like, has a helmet on. I'm like, dang it. Now I'm going to wear a helmet. Just like this more and more things keep happening. I'm like, slow down.
Stop it. Yeah.
Oh, no, it's going along. It's going along very great. But if I didn't have the break it down first, have a guideline, I would be up a creek because it is way more intense than I thought. As you know, with Wasp, all of the seam lines of the MCU are something that it's like, you have to put in there and you put in there and you get lost. It's a forest of seam lines.
Yeah. Yeah, that I got lost so much with Wasp. I took so many work in progress pictures of my base when I first kind of mapped it out on my dummy, just to use it as a reference. I labeled everything like 3 times in 3 different places because the seams would wrap underneath the armpit, and then it would get kind of like jutting up against this other piece. It didn't make any sense. So how did you approach that problem with this? Well, I won't say problem. It's challenge. With this design.
Challenge, and it surely was a challenge because the majority of the stuff that I've done up until Marvel have been gowns, have been things that hang, have been things that are really tailored to my body, as in like a corset, and then kind of free drape after that. This is the first time I've really had to think about stretch and a bodysuit, and having something to have so many seam lines and so many details in that is another challenge because then you can't work it flat. You have to stretch the fabric out to the most point, then add whatever you're doing or cut it out to a certain point. And it's been so much math that I'm like, man, I didn't know I was this good at math, but it's been trial and error because because when I was working through Marvel, I was looking at your Wasp and I was like, well, you're using a lot of like engineering style, like map your body out, cut it out, the patterns the way it should be, as in like, in reality, this is the actual measurement from my knee to my, bottom of my foot. Yeah. Me, I don't have that capability, and I'm old school, I guess. And I just cut and paste pretty much and just tailor. I am taking my clothes off and putting this on so many times as I'm working because everything is trial and error. And like with draping and things like gowns, you can just throw it up on the mannequin, pin, stitch, done. Yeah. Here, I'm like taking off the pants. I'm pinning it to myself. I'm taking it off. I'm cutting something that doesn't work to let something free that stands there. And it was a lot. But once I figured out, the difference between like, am I going to be top stitching stuff on or am I going to be seaming it together? It kind of made more sense. At first, when I did the pants, everything is top stitched on. And I was like, ooh, I don't know if I like that until I got it to work. But when I moved to the top, I looked at your Wasp and I was like, things are seamed together. Things are moving around. You're clipping corners. You're doing this thing. And there was a lot more design, like flat design, than trying to push it to that than I thought. Because I really was like, I'll just top stitch everything on. Oh my God, no. You can't do that because fabric layers and it's hot. And this fabric does not breathe. And I was just like, ooh. Yeah. But once I was able to figure that out, it started working better, I think. But people are asking, probably with your Wasp, how'd you do that? How'd you do that? How'd you do that? And I'm constantly like writing stuff down, like, this is how I did this, because people are asking and I love to share. Yeah. I want to help people make their Marvel, but I want to make understand. And like, it doesn't make sense in my head, but I want to make it sense for you. It's hard. It's hard.
Yeah. So talking about top stitching and flat seams, is that how you say that? I'm woefully uneducated when it comes to terminology for sewing, like the correct way to say stuff. I'm just like, well, I'll put this together and I'll sew it this way, and that's kind of like that's the language that I speak. So
like flat seaming things together when fabric has a seam versus things that are like this. It's like, how do I explain this in a GIF? I don't know. People ask me, I'm like, seam, top stitch. But yeah, that's exactly how I would say. Yeah.
Well, let me ask you a question, because when I was putting my wasp together, I mean, her on the reference pictures, there's so much top stitching happening, especially on the
Yeah.
on the torso part, and I was really afraid of fabrics not stretching with the top stitching.
Yeah. Hmm.
Is that something to consider when you're trying to figure out what kind of stitching you're going to be using? I am asking for
Absolutely.
myself because my suit worked, but there were some areas where I was like, I don't think I can have a top stitch here because it does need to
Yeah.
stretch a little bit. Is there, how would you work around that challenge?
So what I tell people, especially if you're sewing spandex, first off, if you're
Hmm.
seaming anything, it needs to be a zigzag, because a
Okay.
zigzag stitch, like a 2x2, and that's the 2x2 on the sewing machine.
Okay.
Because if you just use a straight stitch, it'll pop, and you don't want that. So I try to tell people, when you're putting together a suit and it's a seam that's going to hold together things that are going to have a lot of stress, use
Hmm.
the zigzag stitch. And on a lot of machines, there actually is a stretch stitch.
Hmm.
On my Bernina that I have, it's a really awesome little stitch. It looks
Hmm.
like a straight stitch, but it's actually tiny little zigzags that are going back and forth.
It's like a
But the
lightning
next, yeah,
icon
like a
on your
little
machine.
lightning
Yeah.
bolt.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a stretch stitch, and that's exactly what that's for. And so I'm trying to, like, if you're making things for like the undersuit, use that stitch. But when you're top stitching, you can get away with a straight stitch.
Okay.
However, put on your suit and pin it to you with a lot of pins, and then carefully take it off and sew it down immediately while you're stretching it out.
Okay.
It's, your suit is going to lose stretch because you're adding more stuff to it. Like the top
Uh-huh.
right now, like for Marvel, is exactly my body shape. It stretches in the back a
Yeah.
little bit for the zipper, but like
Yeah.
that's my body shape. And that's because I've sewn on it so much, it's lost a suit. Versus the
Gotcha.
pants are more like leggings, and they will go on and they'll adhere to me. But when you're top stitching, yes, use a straight stitch, but I would honestly recommend the majority of the time using zigzag stitches, just because you don't want to sit down and then pop, 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 pop. You
Oh,
hear that. You have to
yeah.
think about functionality when you make these suits, and it stinks. Because I want to
That's,
just walk around like this,
oh,
but I
right.
have to sit. I
Oh
don't
my
want
gosh. Yeah, that's, I think, my worst nightmare. I think I actually had a nightmare about that with my wasp costume because I had to take all the stitching out of my back seam that went under around my back and under my crotch because it
to.
was a straight stitch. Because I was like, I'm just going to put it together real quick and then so I
Yeah.
can try it on. And then I kind of forgot it was there.
Yes.
And then I couldn't sit
That's
down.
happened.
I was like, oh,
Hmm.
okay, how do I fix this? There was absolutely no flex in the back. And so I had to
Yeah.
take it out and I think I added the stretch stitch in
Hmm.
there. But I was really afraid that it was going to break again. So I doubled back on the seam
Yeah.
with another stitch,
Hmm.
not on top of it because I didn't want it to freeze up again and be stiff again.
Right.
But yeah, I wasn't really sure how best to approach that. But how is there
And
anything that you can do to a suit like that will maintain a little bit of stretch in there so you can sit down?
just using a zigzag stitch, or
Yeah.
if people
Okay.
haven't access to a serger, an
Hmm.
overlock stitch is what I recommend. The
Oh,
only problem with
okay.
that is that minimizes your seam allowance. And so if you're making something that you're probably going to alter later in the future for
Hmm.
weight differences, or if you want to take it in, you want to take it out, I don't recommend that, because that scrunches your seam allowance down to like an eighth, and you
Hmm.
have no room to play with.
Hmm.
However, when making those suits, that is the ultimate stitch, or the optimum stitch to use, because
With an overlock. Okay.
that gives you the
Okay.
stretch, that gives you the move, and that gives you the seaming it together to where when you open up the seam, it doesn't look like a zigzag stitch. It just looks like a straight stitch.
Ah, I love these little tips and
Yeah.
tricks.
My
Oh
brain
my
is full of
goodness.
them. It's great. That's
Excellent.
why I like to share, because it's like a constant overload of stuff. And I'm like, let me tell you about this. Here, sit, sit, sit.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So, can we talk about your jacket just a little bit? And whoever's listening, if hopefully there's a bunch of people listening.
Gonna be a
I,
bunch of people.
I, yes, hopefully. I have been dying to talk to you, Amanda, about this suit because it is so close to the challenges that I experienced with WASP. So we're going to be talking very heavily about this suit. But definitely please go check out the rest of her stuff. But yeah, let's dive in a little more to your costume.
Go for it. Yeah.
So let's talk about the jacket. How do you get in and out of that thing? Do you have a zipper? Are there panels?
I have one big old separating zipper in the back, and so it does put on like a reverse jacket. And in the back, this is also a fun thing. When you're working with movies that aren't out yet, it's really hard to find images. Okay?
Right? Especially in the back of the costume.
Seriously, that was the hardest thing to figure out. And I mean, honestly, I didn't decide to make Marvel till the trailer popped. It was that or the first Entertainment Weekly images, which I think was like a week before the trailer. And all we have was a knee up, version of the suit. And I was like, well, I can work with that. Go for it. However, up until now, like right now, there has been nothing. And so it's been about since September of last year, I've had to make up stuff. And I don't like that because I want to be as accurate as possible. But I didn't recently find out that there's a big back panel to her suit. And I realized there is a correlation between her Star Force and her Captain Marvel suit. So I could take some of the seam work from that and blend it to this, but I didn't want to, just to make sure, if it was different. And so I started being like, okay, well, I think it is very similar to the Star Force suit. And then I found a panel that actually saved my butt, because the back part of my center back, like the overall piece on the front that is kind of separated from her undershirt, I mismeasured. And so the center back is off. And so I'm just like, this looks like shit, like absolutely terrible. And so I was like, I've got to figure something out to cover it. And then I realized more images were dropping, and I was like, oh, she has a back panel. Praise the costume gods. Thank you.
That's perfect.
So
yes, big old, like, let's hide that back zipper seam.
It was, and it's bad mishigas under that thing. But having the panel over it, and then I just added some good old industrial Velcro on the outside. Covers it, and it makes it look so much better. I'm so happy about it. But up until that point, I was like, how am I going to cover this that makes sense? I don't want something to look weirdly chunky on the back. And then if I keep adding more to this top, it's going to be so hard to wear. And finally, that back panel gave me that push through. I was like, yes, finally. So the top makes sense now versus it didn't before. But yes, it is one big center seam. And I'm using, I'm telling everybody this before I like really talk about the suit. The material that I'm using is very heavy, as in hot, like hot and heavy. My cosplays.
Hot and heavy.
Hot and heavy. It's the ultra cream fabric from the Cosplay collection at Joann's. I think it's the Yaya one. But it's pretty much like, it's like fabric PVC. It does not, it is so thick and it's so hot that I actually sewed in a shaper kind of Under Armour to the pants to collect sweat, as gross as that sounds. And and I was trying it on the other day, and I've tried it on several times, and I can just feel the sweat beading. And so I'm like, if you want to make the suit, do some more fabric research. Find something. I love the look of this fabric, and the sheen is perfect. Like, it just makes sense. But if you can't handle heat, this is not a good fabric to use, because you will get overheated so fast.
Yeah, that is such a challenge. I really lucked out with the Wasp costume because her suit was pretty much perforated the whole thing, and I found some perforated pleather. Yeah, thank you, costume designers.
That's so awesome, because it looked like it had a lot of differences between the pleather, and then it had some mesh work on there that used from spoon flower, which I love the layer texture on that. And I was like, kind of wish Captain Marvel had that, because her is very one note.
It's so solid.
It's so solid. There's a little bit of color difference that I will put in later when it's done. I plan on going in and like painting up some stuff to give her some dimension. But it was kind of solid and flat compared to what the Wasp had with the textures, which was cool, but it worked out.
Yeah. Well, gosh, I'm like staring at it in the background over there. So there are a lot of areas on her suit that are a little bit puffier. They're kind of raised. They've got a little bit more dimension. What was the process that you used to create that dimension?
So I lucked out. I ran across a company at C2E2 last year called Much Cosplay, and they sell this stuff called superstructure foam. And I have used a tons of interfacings in my day with sewing and jazz. And I've never used a foam interfacing that's specifically for fabric, not necessarily like craft foam or EVA foam, and you can sew behind fabric and make it work. This is actually made for fabric. And I was like, I'll give it a shot. And it is fusible to fabric, no matter what fabric. And you can sew through it. It doesn't gum up your needle, but it gives it that raise to where it looks like it's hardened foam. But it's still pliable and malleable, and you can move around in it. And it's really good for collars, structures of coats.
Wow.
But it's a really cool product, and I just looked across it. And I did some more research, and Pellon does have a product that's like that, but it's not good. Like the glue doesn't really stick well. It's also double-sided glue, and it's mainly for quilting. But I was like, I've got to be able to use that. And so I got a yard from them at C2E2, and I was like, I do a lot of really detailed sewing stuff, and I was like, I'm going to use this for my Doctor Strange. And I did, and it's the collar is all that foam with wiring. And so I was able to get this cool quilted look if I sewed into it by just adding in an interfacing.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what I moved to Marvel. But the only problem with that is that, it's like an interfacing. If you fuse it to fabric, especially spandex, it's not going to stretch anymore.
Yeah.
And so that was a thing I had to think about. And I'm like, okay. And that's why I started making panels. And then that's why I started top stitching them on. And then later on, I was like, I'll move to the seam. But the good thing about that foam is that when you seam it, it doesn't chunk up in the seam allowance. So you're able to press it flat. You're able to stitch over it. So it's really good for like super suits. Wow. And so that's how I got that textured, rise up pieces of the panels. It's just a certain interfacing that I used.
That's very cool. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. It's really cool. They're a great company, and I've met them, and they're really sweet. They go by So Much Cosplay, and they're very small, but I have pimped out their superstructure foam. I've used it for 3 costumes so far. It gives a really good rigidity to fabric that doesn't have that, versus having to use a really heavy upholstery interfacing or craft foam, which craft foam is nice, but you have to glue it to that.
Right.
And then it gums up your needle, and it's tough to sew through.
Right. Well, cool. I'm going to check it out for myself for selfish reasons. And I'll definitely include a link to them. So that's So Much Cosplay, and it's called Superstructure Foam. Is that what that's called?
It comes in black. Yep. Okay. But yes, that's exactly it.
Gosh, that's so cool. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I've been watching you putting this together, and it's just so smart the way you did everything in panels, so that you can do like what we were talking about before, little bits and pieces, and then it's like making the puzzle kind of reveals itself as you work along. That's very cool. So let's back up to the beginning of a project like this. How would you approach this kind of project? Do you create a map? How many revisions do you do? Do you make a muslin mock-up? What's your process?
Absolutely. It is 100% mapped out. I am a person, like, my design background has given me structure to where I actually, the suit is already created. It's already, there's images out there. I'm still going to draw it out. I'm still going to figure out where I'm putting certain seams, where things are going, because that's how my brain works. I have to draw it. I have to then make it. And so I have sketchbooks filled with just images of the costumes that I intend to make. Even though there are already images existing, I'm still going to draw it. And so once I draw it out, I try to map out patterns. And I'm a very big proponent of jerry-rigging patterns if you can, versus something draping. Anytime I compete for a competition, no matter the size, I will think about a costume that I'm making. I'm going to try to make the patterns first. But if I'm making something that I know I'm not going to compete with, like Captain Marvel, I'm a big proponent on looking at McCall's, looking at simplicity, and and jerry-rigging patterns together to work for you, because that's just another load off your shoulders. And it can work good and it can work bad, depending on how familiar you are with patterning. And for this one, I actually used two different athleisure leggings and like a running top pattern from Simplicity.
Oh, okay.
And I was able to use that for my like under pieces. From that, I made mock-ups using spandex, not using muslin because that's not the fabric I'm using.
Sure.
So I went and got like a cheap dance wear fabric, whatever is white, and made mock-ups at the top and pants, figured out that, then moved to the flat pattern, then made the suit from the regular fabric. And that's what I do. Majority of stuff that I work on is mock-ups first. I mean, you have to.
Yeah. Well, it sounds so easy. Just, make the mock-up, like tailor it, do it again, and then just make the costume.
It's the old-fashioned way. It's how my professor slammed it into me at school. They were like, "You didn't do the mock-up first." I was like, "I'm sorry."
I learned. Oh yeah, no, I've learned the value of doing a mock-up first, big time. And you know what? Even for WASP, I'm still learning so much about sewing. I didn't make a stretchy. I thought that some parts of the costume wouldn't stretch, so I tried to insert non-stretch material into my mock-up. But then I, I know, that was an experiment that went awry, and I mean, it all worked out in the end. But I definitely learned quite a lot along the way.
You learn fast the difference between 4-way and 2-way stretch.
Oh, gosh, yes. Yeah, listen, I can't tell you how many times I found the perfect fabric, but it's just not in the right stretch. Like, it's either it doesn't stretch, or it stretches too much, or it's not heavy enough. Like, but the texture and the color is perfect. I just need this to work.
I hate that. I hate that. And that can also be similar to, like, dressmaking. When I was making Anastasia, her outer fabric is a very heavy brocade, and I was like, it's so beautiful, and I found so many beautiful silks out there, but I couldn't find the right damask pattern to go for it. And I was like, no, I'm gonna have to go into upholstery, which is like couch fabric, which is so heavy and hot. And I did, and it worked out. But like there's things that you need to I try to tell people, I'm like, you have to think about functionality. You are wearing this, like, think about dragging this giant gown around after it's going to be too heavy or not,
Right.
It might look good on the shelf, like that fabric looks beautiful and it might work, but it's not going to work for your costume and making it.
Yeah. I made a cape for Hippolyta. I made like 3 different rounds of that stupid cape. And I had to do that because I didn't really consider the how it flowed. Everything that I got was really stiff because I liked the color. That backfired on me big time. And now I know, get a little bit first, and then just make sure that the properties kind of work for what you want. And you might have to make some not necessarily sacrifices, but decisions on what fabric to make based on the what you're using it for. So do you ever, like me, I get pretty stubborn sometimes when I'm like, no, I really, really, really want this design. Do you ever resort to designing something yourself and getting it printed somewhere? Have you ever done anything like that?
No. The closest I've ever done to anything that is if I need a specific pattern for fabric, and I work through Spoonflower. But the last time I did that was when I made a Merida costume years ago, because they did not have the images of her like bears and stuff for the bottom of the dress, and so I cracked that out. But the majority of the time, I draw it out and see if it works. Old-fashioned way.
Yeah.
And I'm looking forward to trying out more Cricut stuff, though, because of what you've been posting. And then I asked Santa for a Cricut for Christmas, so I think I might be getting one. And so I'm like, that's going to help for a lot of things instead of hand drawing everything.
Yes, I use that thing so much. I love it. I love it so much. Actually, just today I was working on my first video that I'm going to be putting out on how to use it to cut EVA foam, because it's amazing. So it saves so much time. I mean,
good. I'm looking forward. I'm looking forward to that. I'm really looking forward to that. My next piece is another Queen of Medalla, and she has these symbols that are like these crazy little vinyl cutouts of just this weird symbol. And I'm like, ugh, I don't want to have to hand draw that, but I'm like, Cricut's going to do that.
Yes, make the robot do it.
I'll make the robot do it. I make it do it for the embroidery. Why not just cut out stuff? It's fine. Right? You do that too. It's my little sweatshop up here.
Oh, right. I love seeing that more people are using that the Cricut, and a lot of people I think are going to be pretty happy for Christmas or their holidays because I think that is becoming an up and coming little tool for any maker. And a lot of people have been just using it for, scrapbooking and that kind of thing. So I think a lot of folks like me were initially dismissing it as like, what am I going to do with that?
It's just really a paper cutter. It's not going to help.
Yeah, exactly. But I have etched acrylic with it. That's how I did my wasp wings. There's actually a separate attachment that is not a Cricut attachment. It's made by a company called Comus. It's CHOMAS. I'll put a link on this episode to that. But that thing is amazing because you can. I mean, it's pretty powerful. It will etch pretty much anything. But you can cut wood with it. You can cut fabric. I just got a couple of a scoring attachment for Black Friday sales. Oh my God. Yeah, I'm really excited.
I'm looking forward to playing with it. I really am because like having these machines help us to work out these costumes. It's just exciting because like you, I immediately dismissed the Cricut as just a scrapbooking paper cutter thing. Yeah. And then they're releasing like a better version, a bigger print, tray area, like nicer cutter materials. And I'm like, I think that'll work for what I need. And then I've seen you and I've seen Cowboy Crunchies use it. And I've seen other people start using it more. And I'm like, let's do it.
You got to get one.
Santa!
Oh my gosh.
Santa!
Yeah, right. Cool.
I'm excited.
Oh my gosh. Well, it's nice to have these tools kind of inspire some more projects. And once you get to a point where you're feeling a little bit more comfortable with it and you got to share your tips with me too.
I definitely will. I mean, the first thing it's going to do is going to cut some gold vinyl or some gold fabric, whatever I choose for that Amidala dress. It's like, I'm just so happy I don't have to do that by hand because it's a giant piece of weird symbol. And I'm like, it's going to take me so much time. And Marvel's taking longer than expected. And so like my time is slowly getting smaller because that needs to be done C2E2 and then Amidala needs to be done by Star Wars Celebration, which is wonderfully only 2 weeks away apart from each other. I'm just like,
oh my gosh,
time. It's near
after
Emerald City.
Yeah,
it's after.
I think it's after Emerald City.
Yes,
because one of my friends is competing. Yeah, Friendwart cosplay.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Oh, he's
I was like, wait, who's your friend?
He's my heart. I love him.
Hey, he's making a killer Glinda.
I can't wait to see. I just wish I could be there in person. And he was like, "Oh my God, girl, you need to come." And like, it's way too close to Emerald City. Like packing in like a travel con during that time is just going to be impossible. Like I'm not a full-time. I don't do this full-time and I don't get paid for this. So
join the club, girlfriend. I'm just really lucky to have both Star Wars Celebration and C2E2 in Chicago, which is only about 5 hours away from Louisville. So it is a drivable distance. Fun for me, but I'm lucky. And I was like, I can swing both of them, but I barely, but I can do it. But
yeah,
I'll tell him you said hello.
Yes, please give him a big old hug from me. Awesome. Well, I could talk to you forever about everything. I hope that you will join me again sometime, and we can gush over another costume. Or I can gush over another costume that you have made. I'll definitely probably want to talk to you after your next Amidala costume because oh my gosh, your first one's just amazing. So yes, listeners, please go stalk her online everywhere. Where can we find you online?
Well, you can find me anywhere that my name JediManda is attached to. I'm pretty much got the corner market on that. This is nice. But I tell people to go to JediManda.com, which is my website, and it's a blog mostly. And I do have full write-ups of all my costumes that I've made since Wonder Woman, which was 2 years ago. So I have full, and I tell people, because I get so many questions, how'd you make it? How'd you make it? How'd you make it? And I'm like, go here, go here, go here. Because I can't tell you anything else. I've spilled it already on my blog. Like, that's the best place to do it. And so if you follow that, you'll be able to get to my other social medias, which I'm mainly on Facebook, Instagram. I do have a YouTube, and I will be posting tutorials on Captain Marvel, full write-up, full video. I'm recording it the whole time because she's just going to make a splash, and I want to share because it's so much fun making it. As much of a challenge as it was really fun making it, and I want to tell people how they can make their own. But I do have a YouTube channel, and that's also at JediManda versus Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. The good old Fab Four.
Very cool. Well, gosh, thank you so much again for chatting with me on this third episode of ShePropTalk. And also, listeners, this is we didn't really talk about it this issue or in this episode, but Amanda is also one of our members in SheProp, which is a forum that I hope that you will come and join us and show us your work and everything. But thank you again. I'm Beverly from Down in Creative Studios. You can find me on all the social medias on Down in Creative Studios. And please like, subscribe, and review. That's how that goes. I'm getting better at this.
Review on Apple Podcasts. And all the places you can find podcasts. I listen to a lot of podcasts.
Me too, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to start this. But if you're just listening, I'm also trying to do a little bit more with the video part too. So I'm going to be throwing up some images of Amanda's amazing work. So you can check it out online too. So, all right. Well, that's all we have time for today. Thank you so much, Amanda.
Thank you, Beverly. This was awesome. Bye.
Bye.